Welcome back to Bible Quizzes. Today's quiz focuses on children of the Bible. Let's get started. 1. Who is the first child mentioned in the Bible? Cain, Seth, Abel, or Enoch? Cain. Genesis 4:1. Adam made love to his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, "With the help of the Lord I have brought forth a man." 2. Which child was offered as a sacrifice by his father but was saved by an angel? Isaac, Jacob, Ishmael, or Joseph? Isaac. Genesis 22:9-12. Then they came to the place of which God had told him, and Abraham built an altar there and placed the wood in order. And he bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." So he said, "Here I am." And he said, "Do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." 3. Who was the mother of Samuel? Sarah, Leah, Rebecca, or Hannah? Hannah. 1 Samuel 1:20. So it came to pass in the process of time that Hannah conceived and bore a son, and called his name Samuel, saying, "Because I have asked for him from the Lord." 4. Which young boy heard God's voice calling him in the night? David, Joseph, Samuel, or Joshua? Samuel. 1 Samuel 3:4-10. Then the Lord called Samuel, and he answered, "Here I am." So he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, for he called me." And he said, "I did not call. Lie down again." And he went and lay down. 5. Which baby was hidden in a basket among the reeds of the Nile River? Moses, Joshua, Aaron, or Rehoboam? Moses. Exodus 2:3. But when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes for him, daubed it with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the river's bank. 6. Who was the youngest son of Jacob and Rachel? Joseph, Benjamin, Judah, or Levi? Benjamin. Genesis 35:18. And so it was, as her soul was departing, for she died, that she called his name Benoni, but his father called him Benjamin. 7. Who was the boy that defeated a giant with a sling and stone? Samuel, Jonathan, David, or Solomon? David. 1 Samuel 17:49. Then David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and he slung it, and struck the Philistine in his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the earth. 8. Which boy sold by his brothers and later became a ruler in Egypt? Joseph, Dan, Benjamin, or Reuben? Joseph. Genesis 37:28. Then Midianite traders passed by, so the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. 9. Who was the child that God promised to Abraham and Sarah in their old age? Ishmael, Esau, Jacob, or Isaac? Isaac. Genesis 17:19. Then God said, "No, Sarah, your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him." 10. Which young boy became king at the age of 8? Joash, David, Josiah, or Solomon? Josiah. 2 Kings 22:1. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jedediah, and daughter the daughter of Ediah of Bozkath. 11. Who was the mother of John the Baptist? Elizabeth, Martha, Mary, or Hannah? Elizabeth. Luke 1:13. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John." 12. Which child had a coat of many colors? Joseph, Samuel, David, or Solomon? Joseph. Genesis 37:3. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. Also he made him a tunic of many colors. 13. Which child was left behind in Jerusalem by his parents and found in the temple? John, Jesus, James, or Peter? Jesus. Luke 2:46-47. Now so it was that after 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, both listening to them and asking them questions, and all who heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. 14. Who was the son of David and Bathsheba that became king? Solomon, Amnon, Absalom, or Adonijah? Solomon. 1 Kings 1:30. Surely as I vowed to you by the Lord the God of Israel, saying, your son Solomon shall be king after me, and he shall sit on my throne in my place. I will indeed do so this day. 15. Who was a prophet that anointed David as king when he was a young shepherd? Nathan, Samuel, Elijah, or Elisha? Samuel. 1 Samuel 16:13. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from the day forward. So Samuel arose and went to Ramah. 16. Who was the child that was firstborn of Jacob and Leah? Reuben, Isaac, Ishmael, or Esau? Reuben. Genesis 29:32. So Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said, the Lord has surely looked on my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. 17. Who was the judge of Israel who was the son of Manoah? Samson, Jephthah, Gideon, or Ehud? Samson. Judges 13:24. So the woman bore a son and called his name Samson. The child grew and the Lord blessed him. 17. Which king ordered the killing of all boys 2 years old and under in Bethlehem? Herod. Matthew 2:16. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. 19. Who was a child that Jesus raised from the dead, who was the daughter of Jairus? Sarah, Miriam, Talitha, or Mary? Talitha. Mark 5:41-42. He took her by the hand and said to her, Talitha cum, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. 20. Who were the sons of Zebedee? Peter and Andrew, Matthew and Thomas, James and John, or Philip and Bartholomew? James and John. Matthew 4:21. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, sons of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. Jesus called them. 21. Samuel was the father of King Solomon. False. 1 Kings 2:1. When the time drew near for David to die, he gave a charge to Solomon his son. 22. Which child was known for his long hair that gave him strength? David, Absalom, Samson, or John the Baptist? Samson, Judges 16:17. So he told her everything. No razor has ever been used on my head, he said, because I have been a Nazirite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man. 23. Who was a child that God called in the night thinking it was Eli? Samuel, David, Saul, or Jonathan? Samuel, 1 Samuel 3:4. Then the Lord called Samuel. Samuel answered, Here I am. 24. Who are the twin sons of Isaac and Rebekah? Jacob and Esau, Joseph and Benjamin, Cain and Abel, or Ephraim and Manasseh? Jacob and Esau, Genesis 25:24. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. 25. Who was a child that was hidden by his aunt Jehosheba to protect him from being killed by Athaliah? Joash, Hezekiah, Josiah, or Jehoiakim? Joash, 2 Kings 11:2. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Jehoram and sister of Ahaziah, took Joash son of Ahaziah and stole him away from among the royal princes who were about to be murdered. She put him and his nurse in a bedroom to hide him from Athaliah so he was not killed. 26. Who was the young boy that God chose to anoint as king after Saul? Samuel, Jonathan, David, or Tamar? David, 1 Samuel 16:12. So he sent for him and had him brought in. He was glowing with health and had a fine appearance and handsome features. Then the Lord said, Rise and anoint him, this is the one. 27. Which child was taken into Pharaoh's palace and raised as an Egyptian prince? Isaac, Moses, Joseph, or Aaron? Moses, Exodus 2:10. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. 28. Which child was prophesied to be born to a virgin and called Emmanuel? John, Isaac, Jesus, or Samuel? Jesus, Isaiah 7:14. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel. 29. Which child was the son of Ruth and Boaz? Obed, Genesis 38:9-10. The woman living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. 30. Who was a child that Jesus took in his arms to teach a lesson about humility? Son of Pharisee, child from the crowd, daughter of Roman centurion, or daughter of Jairus? Child from the crowd. Mark 9:36-37. He took a little child whom he placed among them. Taking the child in his arms, he said to them, Whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me. 31. Which child's name means laughter because his mother laughed when told she would have a son? Isaac, Jacob, Ishmael, or Esau? Isaac, Genesis 21:6. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. 32. Who was the child that God spoke to in the temple, calling his name 3 times? Eli, Samuel, David, or Jonathan? Samuel, 1 Samuel 3:10. The Lord came and stood there, calling as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. Then Samuel said, Speak, for your servant is listening. 33. Which child dreamed of a ladder reaching to heaven with angels ascending and descending on it? Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, or Jacob? Jacob, Genesis 28:12. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, when its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. 34. Who was a child born to Zacharias and Elizabeth in their old age? Isaac, Jesus, John the Baptist, or Samuel? John the Baptist. Luke 1:57-58. When it was time for Elizabeth to have her baby, she gave birth to a son. Her neighbors and relatives heard that the Lord had shown her great mercy, and they shared her joy. 35. Which child ran to tell his brothers that he had found Jesus the Messiah? Andrew, John, Peter, or Philip? Andrew, John 1:41. First thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, We have found the Messiah, that is, the Christ. 36. Which child said, I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me? Isaac, Joseph, Jacob, or Benjamin? Joseph. Genesis 37:9. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. Listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. 37. Which child said, My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? Isaac, Naaman's servant girl, Naaman's son, or Gehazi? Naaman's servant girl. 2 Kings 5:13. Naaman's servants went to him and said, My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, Wash and be cleansed? 38. Which child prophesied the coming of the Messiah and was known as the voice of the one calling in the wilderness? John the Baptist, Jesus, Peter, or Paul? John the Baptist. John 1:23. John replied in the words of Isaiah the prophet, I am the voice of one calling in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord. 39. Solomon judged wisely over the rightful mother of a child, but how did he determine who the child belonged to? He drew lots, God told him, threatened to divide the child, or a witness came forward. God told him, 1 Kings 3:24-27. Then the king said, Bring me a sword. So they brought a sword for the king. He then gave an order, Cut the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other. The woman whose son was alive was deeply moved out of love for her son and said to the king, Please, my lord, give her the living baby. Don't kill him. But the other said, Neither I nor you shall have him. Cut him in two. Then the king gave his ruling, Give the living baby to the first woman. Do not kill him. She is his mother. 40. How did baby Moses' mother protect him from Pharaoh's decree to kill all Hebrew baby boys? She hid him in a cave, took him to the wilderness, she placed him in a basket and onto the Nile, or she disguised him as an Egyptian. She placed him in a basket and onto the Nile. Exodus 2:3. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. 41. Hannah dedicated her son to Samuel to the Lord by making a vow and taking him to live in the temple. true. 1 Samuel 1, 27-28. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he'll be given over to the Lord. And he worshiped the Lord there. 42. How did Jesus respond when the disciples tried to stop children from being brought to him? He agreed and sent the children away, rebuked the disciples and welcomed the children, ignored the disciples and continued teaching, or asked the parents to wait until he finished teaching. He rebuked the disciples and welcomed the children. Mark 10:14. When Jesus saw this, he was indignant. He said to them, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these." 43. How did the young David respond to Goliath's challenge? He ignored it and returned to his sheep, tried to negotiate peace with Goliath. He sought Saul's approval to fight Goliath, or he fled in fear. He sought Saul's approval to fight Goliath. 1 Samuel 17:32. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." 44. How did the child Jesus demonstrate his wisdom at the age of 12? By teaching in the synagogue, writing scriptures, performing miracles, or conversing with the teachers in the temple. By conversing with the teachers in the temple. Luke 2:46-47. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. 45. Which child declared, "But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve." Joshua 24:15. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourself this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. 46. How did God instruct Abraham to prove his faith involving his son Isaac? By sending Isaac to a foreign land, by offering Isaac as a sacrifice, by dedicating Isaac to the service of the Lord, or by building a temple for God. By offering Isaac as a sacrifice. Genesis 22:2. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." 47. When Job had his fortune restored, he was blessed with 7 sons and 3 daughters. Which of these was not a daughter of Job? Jemima, Karen Hapik, Keziah, or Naomi? Naomi, 1 Kings 13:29-30. And he also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. The first daughter he named Jemima, the second Keziah, and the third Karen Hapik. 48. Which of Joseph's brothers suggested that they sell Joseph to the Ishmaelites instead of killing him? Reuben, Simeon, Judah, or Levi? Judah, Genesis 37:26-27. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. 49. Which child's mother prayed for a son and vowed to dedicate him to the Lord all the days of his life? Elizabeth, Rachel, Sarah, or Hannah? Hannah, 1 Samuel 1:11. And she made a vow, saying, "Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head." 50. Esau was the firstborn son of Abraham and Hagar. False. Genesis 16:15. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. 51. In the prophecy of Isaiah, where will a little child play in the future? Den of a lion, near the den of a cobra, lair of a wolf, or cave of a leopard? Near the den of a cobra. Isaiah 11:8. The infant will play near the cobra's den, and the young child will put its hand into the viper's nest. 52. At the feeding of the 5,000, a young lad provided what? 5 loaves, 2 fishes, 1 loaf, 5 fishes, 10 loaves and 5 fishes, or 7 loaves and 3 fishes? 5 loaves, 2 fishes. John 6:9. Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many? 53. What was David's job as the youngest child in the family? A cleaner, musician, errand boy, or shepherd? Shepherd. 1 Samuel 16:11. So he asked Jesse, are these all the sons you have? There's still the youngest, Jesse answered. He is tending his sheep. Samuel said, send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives. 54. Who said, when I was a child I spake as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child, but when I became a man I put away the childish things? Paul. 1 Corinthians 13:11. When I was a child I spake as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child, but when I became a man I put away childish things. 55. What happened to the Shunammite's son? He did not have enough food to eat. He died and Elisha raised him back to life, developed leprosy, or nursed his mother through an illness. He died and Elisha raised him back to life. 2 Kings 4:32-35. When Elisha reached the house, there was the boy lying dead on his couch. He went in, shut the door on the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. Then he got on the bed and lay on the boy, mouth to mouth, eyes to eyes, hands to hands, and he stretched himself out on him. The boy's body grew warm. Elisha turned away and walked back and forth in the room, and then got on the bed and stretched out on him once more. The boy sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. 56. According to the book of Proverbs, what is bound in the heart of a child? Salvation, wisdom, foolishness, or idleness? Foolishness. Proverbs 22:15. Folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far away. 57. Who said, thou art my beloved son, in thee I am well pleased? Solomon, Adam, David, or God? God. Luke 3:22. And the Holy Ghost descended in a bodily shape like a dove upon him, and a voice came from heaven which said, thou art my beloved son, in thee I am well pleased. 58. Which missionary was taught the scriptures from an early age? Paul, Mark, Timothy, or Barnabas? Timothy. 2 Timothy 3:15. And how from infancy you have known the holy scriptures, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith in Christ Jesus. 59. What was the name of the city where Elijah raised the widow's son? Zarephath, Beersheba, Gilead, or Samaria? Zarephath. 1 Kings 17:10. So he went to Zarephath. When he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, "Would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink?" 60. Who was a young boy that was killed by a lion for teasing the prophet Elisha? Boy from Bethel, child of the Shunammite woman, son of the widow of Zarephath, or boy in the wilderness? Boy from Bethel, 2 Kings 2:23-24. From there Elisha went up to Bethel. As he was walking along the road, some boys came out from the town and jeered at him. "Get out of here, you bald head," they said. "Get out of here, you bald head." He turned around and looked at them and called down a curse on them in the name of the Lord. Then 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys. 61. Who was the young prophet who prophesied to King Josiah while he was still a child? Jeremiah, Elisha, Isaiah, or Nathan? Jeremiah, 2 Kings 22:15. She said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Tell the man who sent you to me." 62. Who was the mother of Isaac who gave birth to him after a long period of barrenness? Rachel, Rebekah, Leah, or Sarah? Sarah, Genesis 21:2. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the very time God had promised him. 63. Who was the widow who met the baby Jesus at the temple? Anna, Lydia, Mary Magdalene, or Priscilla? Anna, Luke 2:36-37. There was also a prophet Anna, the daughter of Penuel, of the tribe of Asher. She was very old. She had lived with her husband 7 years after her marriage, and then was a widow until she was 84. She never left the temple, but worshipped night and day, fasting and praying. 64. Which child was born into the house of Levi and was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter? Aaron, Samuel, Joseph, or Moses? Moses, Exodus 2:10. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." 65. Who was dedicated by his mother to the Lord and became the last judge of Israel? Daniel, David, Samuel, or Jeroboam? Samuel, 1 Samuel 1:28. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord, and he worshipped the Lord there. 66. What child was 13 years old when he was circumcised? Isaac, Esau, Ishmael, or Jacob? Ishmael, Genesis 17:25. And Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised. 67. What was David doing when Samuel called to anoint him king? Hunting, killing a lion, tending sheep, or playing the harp? Tending sheep. 1 Samuel 16:11. So he asked Jesse, "Are these all the sons you have?" "They are still the youngest," Jesse answered. "He is tending the sheep." Samuel said, "Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives." 68. Who once caught 300 foxes, tied them together in pairs with firebrands on their tails, and loosed them into his enemies' cornfields to set their crops on fire? Abner, Samson, Abel, or Samuel? Samson, Judges 15:4-5. So he went out and caught 300 foxes and tied them tail to tail in pairs. He then fastened a torch to every pair of tails, lit the torches, and let the foxes loose in the stands grain of the Philistines. 69. Who was a twin and Abraham's grandson whose mother was Rebekah? Isaac, Ishmael, Joseph, or Esau? Esau. Genesis 25:24. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. 70. Which prophet was told by God to name his son Maher-shalal-Hashbaz? Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, or Hosea? Isaiah 8:3. Then I went to the prophetess, and she conceived and gave birth to a son, and the Lord said to me, name him Maher-shalal-Hashbaz. 71. Who was the young boy who interpreted dreams for Pharaoh and later became a ruler in Egypt? Daniel, Samuel, Joseph, or Ezekiel? Joseph. Genesis 41:14. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. 72. Who was a child of the high priest Eli, whose wickedness led to a prophecy of judgment against Eli's house? Phinehas, Samuel, Hophni, or Eliab? Hophni. 1 Samuel 2:34. And what happens to your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, will be assigned to you. They will both die on the same day. 73. Who was the young man who was a servant to the prophet Elisha and witnessed the miracle of the floating axe head? Gehazi, Eleazar, Jehu, or Abiathar? Gehazi. 2 Kings 6:5-6. As one of them was cutting down a tree, the iron axe head fell into the water. Oh no, my lord, he cried out. It was borrowed, the man of God asked. Where did it fall? When he showed him the place, Elisha cut a stick and threw it there and made the iron float. 74. Who was the child of the prophet Hosea, whose name means not my people? Jezreel, Lo-ruhamah, Gomer, or Lo-ami? Lo-ami. Hosea 1:9. Then the Lord said, call him Lo-ami, which means not my people, for you are not my people, and I am not your God. 75. Which prophet's son was struck dead by God for touching the Ark of the Covenant when it was being transported? Samuel, Isaiah, Eli, or Jeremiah? Eli. 1 Samuel 4:17. The messenger replied, Israel fled before the Philistines, and the army has suffered heavy losses. Also, your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God has been captured. 76. Which prophet had a vision of a young man with a measuring line in his hand, measuring the dimensions of Jerusalem? Ezekiel, Isaiah, Zechariah, or Daniel? Zechariah 2:1-2. Then I looked up, and there before me was a man with a measuring line in his hand. I asked, where are you going? He answered me, to measure Jerusalem, to find out its width and length. 77. Which child was chosen by God to be a prophet and was called while playing in the streets of Jerusalem? Zechariah, Ezekiel, Joel, or Daniel? Ezekiel 1:1. In the 13th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day, while I was among the exiles by the Kebar River, the heavens were opened and I saw visions of God. 78. Which child was anointed as a prophet while he was still very young and later witnessed the destruction of his Jerusalem? Daniel, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, or Zephaniah? Jeremiah 1:6-7. Alas, sovereign Lord, I said, I do not know how to speak, I am too young. The Lord said to me, do not say I am too young. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. 79. Which child of King Solomon asks for wisdom to govern and was known for his proverbs and wise judgments? Rehoboam, Uzziah, Jeroboam, or Josiah? Rehoboam, 1 Kings 3:9. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong, for who is able to govern this great people of yours? 80. Who was a young boy that saw a vision of a basket of summer fruit and that symbolized the end of Israel's harvest? Amos, Zephaniah, Joel, or Nahum? Amos 8, 1-2. This is what the sovereign Lord showed me. A basket of ripe fruit, he said. What do you see, Amos? A basket of ripe fruit, I answered. Then the Lord said to me, the time is ripe for my people Israel. I will spare them no longer. And that's all the questions that we have for today. So remember, put your score down below and then share this video with your friends and family so you can compare your score against theirs, and then we'll see you guys in the next one.